Okay, we are right on top of the hour. So, hello, welcome everyone. Glad to have you here. Thank you for taking your time out. And today we start with the first session of the Modern Private Cloud Smart Webinar series. So, before we go ahead on the session, I would also like to introduce everyone to the Broadcom Rewards program. So, it's a community of tech professionals like you, and where you can take challenges, put your expertise, upskill yourself, and gain rewards points. And the best part is you can exchange the reward points for some cool Broadcom swags. You can see this QR code here. You will also be getting an email to join the Broadcom Rewards program. I would also kind of give a heads up on the next two sessions for coming up for the dates in July and August. So we have the session 2, which is powering the modern workloads and automation on 31st July, and the third session primarily on security, how to fortify your cloud on 13th August. So make sure if your friends, your teams have not registered, you can register. For folks who have already registered, do not need to re-register. Moving on, we have our flagship event coming up in the month of August in Las Vegas. So August 25th to 28th, you will see Explore, giving you a lot more information on technology, innovation, and what's next in VCF 9. People who can't make to Las Vegas, don't be sad. We do have 6 more Explore on tours, 3 in APJ region and 3 in EMEA. You can scan the QR code to know more about each region, where the registrations for Mumbai and London is live. So before I go ahead, and would like to introduce our speakers for the day today. We have Nick and Greg as expert technical speakers, supported by Jatin, who is going to answer all your volley of questions.
Excellent. Great stuff. Thank you guys for joining and welcome along. So yeah, Nick and I and Jatin will take you through the rest of some content we've got today. There's a huge amount of stuff to cover in VCF9, as you'd probably imagine. But the first session, we're just going to focus on some of the fundamentals and we'll go into it from there. So Nick, I think you've got the control. Awesome. Great. So look, everyone I think on this call has probably heard this language before around cloud, being more of an operating model or more of a way of working rather than a location itself. I guess we get the terms a little bit mixed up, and there's private and public cloud and all sorts of different elements of what we call cloud and descriptions today. But I think what we're hearing from a lot of customers and what we've really settled on is 5 key elements we think that make up a cloud of any description. I think the first one is software-defined infrastructure. It's something we've been leading for, I think, more than nearly 15 years. I guess we've been at the forefront, a pioneer in software-defined infrastructure. The ability, I guess, to sort of operate and talk to and configure and use the infrastructure regardless of what sort of hardware you've got, what vendor you're using, whatever it might be. That becomes really critical when you start operating at scale, and it gives you a lot of flexibility to work. But it also gives you flexibility as it moves into the next one, which is around self-service and automation. And that can be things around the configuration of the infrastructure itself, or it could be in terms of how you carve it up and divvy it up to the rest of your organization in terms of being able to run workloads on or even create workloads on. So without that sort of software element to it, the automation piece becomes really challenging. And if you look at what's going on in most of the public clouds and all that, it is still the de facto standard for how we build infrastructure across the world. And I think, that's 2 of the main elements we see. We deal with a lot of customers like you guys at the moment. We're going through a bit of a sort of transition at times. We've got a list of VMs and applications that run as, I guess our traditional workloads that we have to protect and look after. But then we've got other parts of the organizations where we say, we want to be able to move along and we want to be able to leverage maybe a Kubernetes infrastructure to run workloads or build workloads on. Or maybe every application we're building nowadays has some sort of connectivity or some sort of integration with AI, which it seems like almost every application does these days. So the platform itself has to be really agnostic in terms of the types of applications we want to be able to run and the types that we want to be able to build on top of. So that's the third key element. And then, of course, every customer we speak to is largely, a lot of them are running workloads and infrastructure in data centers that are in a city or out in a suburban location or somewhere like that. But we see heaps of customers that run, at sites, it could be things like an aeroplane or a ship or a remote supermarket or something like that. We've got customers doing it in mines, oil rigs, all sorts of places. And the idea of our cloud platform, at least, is that it should be able to operate and run anywhere that a customer chooses, and it shouldn't necessarily have to go through a whole lot of refactoring to make that work. So you can feel comfortable that wherever you want to run this stuff, it can look very similar to everywhere else you want to run it. And that's a key component. And lastly, of course, every customer wants to know that what they're getting as part of their investment is highly secure, something that they can maintain the level of governance, maintain the level of patching, security built in from not just the, sort of all levels, from the host to the hypervisor, all the way through to the application and the flows and everything that they choose to look at, that's all in that complete stack. So there's a whole lot of elements there that we need to make sure that we provide as part of that. So that's the 5 key elements we think that's critical to operating a cloud of some description. So how do we deliver this? So we've got this idea of what we think a modern private cloud should really look like. And this is the picture of VCF 9. And to talk you through it quickly, what we need to do is focus, first of all, on the person down in the left-hand corner. So this is the cloud administrator or the cloud admin team, operations team, whatever it might be. And they're largely responsible for the compute, the storage, the networking, and managing all that to make sure that everyone's got access to it. We've got our tenancy configured so that everyone's got access to the right amounts of capacity, the right amounts of governance, or at least access to that infrastructure, so that it's everyone's working on from the same sheet. And then we've got things like fleet management and security management we need to have across all of that as well. So that's where the administrative and operations teams really focus. Their work is really critical, though, when you start thinking about the consumer. This might be a team of application developers. It might be just the line of businesses that actually run their applications. But they also have to think about, well, how do I create and build catalogs and orchestrate application development and create content that we as a tenant or we as a line of business use to deploy onto this platform that the company has actually delivered for us. So that's really kind of key. Now, they want to do that in a couple of different ways, whether that's through standard virtualization catalogs and templates, whether that's through Kubernetes clusters and infrastructure and containers and all sorts of methods like that, or whether it's through leveraging AI and ML frameworks and things to be able to stitch in to everything they're going to actually build on top of the platform. So those two folks and those two teams are really, really critical to making up what Cloud Foundation 9 is really all about. But we go a step further than that. If you look at the advanced services line here as well, where you typically would go to a public cloud or any sort of cloud of description and see a whole bunch of services from a catalog perspective, you can tie into what you're delivering as an application owner or potentially deliver as a platform owner as well. So say maybe I need disaster recovery as part of the platform offering and the capability that I offer. This is actually critical to be able to get in and stitch those together into what you're delivering as part of the core platform as well. If you look a little bit deeper into that, the catalog of services we have available today is things like threat protection, advanced threat protection or firewalling for the applications themselves. It might be things like database as a service, which we support through Data Services Manager and things like that as well. There might be AI tools or NVIDIA tools we have as part of private AI, disaster and ransomware recovery through live recovery, identity access management, you name it. A robust catalog of services that everyone can really start to tap into and add more and more capability to their VCF 9 private cloud platform. So how do we do that with VCF 9 and what's fundamentally different? There's been two really key critical things, I guess, with VCF 9 that we've been able to achieve. The first one is, or the first two really, is around the simplification of how those users you saw before, those teams you saw before, actually interact with the platform. First of all, what we've done is we've centralized a lot of the operational and management tooling into, excuse me, a single interface around called VCF operations. And that's a really one-stop shop really for everyone to go. When you log in, when you get your VCF environment up and running, you log into there and you can do all the sort of operational operational tasks and things like that that you need to do through that interface. On the flip side, if you think about the other users in that sense, a single tool called VCF Automation, which brings together all the components of ARIA automation and a whole bunch of things into a single consumption interface, whether it's an API, a CLI, or a UI that the consumers want to leverage. So the simplification of all of that and really trying to bring some of most of the SDC workflows together into VCF operations and things like that is really the journey that we've been on, and we think that we're very, very close to completing that. But clearly, this is the function and the future of how you interact with the system. We also have a whole bunch of customers that tell us, look, we want to leverage the investment we've already got, but we need to be able to stand up an infrastructure that is based on Kubernetes that provides a more modern application, topology, let's say, or framework. And we've really made our VMware Kubernetes service, our Kubernetes offering, a first-class citizen in VCF 9 now as well. So that's a critical component of being able to run Kubernetes workloads and Kubernetes clusters alongside VMs and alongside your traditional applications in the same platform with all of the same operational management and governance and automation and everything around it as well, which is really, really key to, again, modernizing what a cloud looks like. And the last two are really important as well. Every customer tells us we need to have it essentially secure by design. We need to be able to maintain that if we're running this as a platform within our own country or whatever it might be for sovereign reasons, that it is critical that it all works and runs together. And the challenges we've had in the past with cloud has always been around the fact that left unchecked, cost control is something that's very, very difficult to deal with. So being able to provide the governance and transparency through cost control of what you invest in and how you use it over time and things like that is absolutely fundamentally key to what's different in VCF 9 and sort of things we've built on as well. To give you a quick look at that, actually, as I think about this, one of the questions that comes up all the time is around, how do I get from VCF, a previous version of VCF, for instance, version 5, to version 9 or whatever it might be. Or if I need to install VCF, is it only greenfields? Is it upgrade paths and all that sort of stuff? The answer is, if you're already on VCF and you can get to version 5.2, there's an easy upgrade path directly into vSphere 9, and you'll be able to take control of all of the capabilities that are in there as well. You might have different sort of things where you choose to do greenfield deployments as well, but there's certainly an upgrade path. There are other nuances you may have as a customer that you potentially want to talk to your account teams about, but certainly we're trying to make the upgrade to 9 as seamless as possible for as many customers as we possibly can. To sort of give you the picture, to reiterate the previous slide, was around what a VCF fleet sort of looks like now. So this concept of a fleet where we might have multiple VCF instances, whether they're in data centers or in remote sites and things like that. But now you've got this idea of VCF operations and automation really being able to connect to and manage multiple environments and things like that. So you can see how these tools become really, really critical to the future of what that looks like. If you look at VCF operations, particularly, if you flick over to the next one, Nick, it shows what we've been able to bring into the VCF operations tool itself now. So we've basically simplified everything, all these other products that we had, log operations, network operations, health and diagnostics, and all these elements we had as separate products and things like that now have been brought into a single VCF operations product. Now, the great thing about that is that customers have been looking at this saying, this is so simple, so much easier for me to just log in and have everything at my fingertips and bring all those capabilities into VCF operations has been a really big win for a lot of customers when they look at VCF 9. And then if you look at the next hand side of the slide, which is around fleet management, it's about how do we configure the basic fundamentals of the VCF platform with things like identity and access management. How do we manage certificates? How do we manage tags? How do we manage passwords, configuration, lifecycle, all those critical things that everyone has to think about when we start looking at a VCF platform or a virtualized platform in that sense. They're absolutely really key. They're all embedded now. All those things are now embedded into VCF operations. And I could probably talk about them and show you slides on them for a long period of time. But I think Nick's got a bit of a demonstration that he'd be able to show you, which might give you a visualization of what does this look like, at least initially. And it might take you through some of the things that we've been just discussing here in a very short space of time.
Cool. Thank you, Greg. Yep. We're going to show a few of those options. Actually, I'm just going to flick back to that slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some of the fleet management parts of this. One thing I do want to call out, as I'm going through this, keep in mind that as we jump into this new console here, as you can see up here, we're talking about VCF operations, or VMware Cloud Foundation operations. And a lot of the different options and whatnot are down here. The existing tools, the existing interfaces, at the moment, they're still there. Okay, we're trying to centralize and unify everything into a nice, easy to use place. But we also know that there are existing tools and existing processes that still need those other places. So in this first initial release, those other interfaces, depending on which one, a lot of them still exist, and you can still go in there as you transition over to this new way of working. So don't be put off by everything's changed, because not everything's changed. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. Alrighty, let's go in and start talking about identity and access management. So if we go into this area of fleet management here, you can see within here we have a hierarchical tree from a single sign-on perspective. Now, if you've ever used VCF or a collection of VMware products in the past, you'll know that every time you go into a different product, you have to log on to a different interface. Whereas now we've unified that into a single sign-on hierarchy, so that once you've connected your VCF instance, which we'll do here, we'll go in here and we'll say, what is the identity source for this whole instance, right? And we'll go in here and we'll make sure that we can configure all of the things that are in this instance. And you can see in here we've got different things like vCenter servers and NSX managers and that kind of stuff. And we're going to go in and we're going to change or add these items to be connected to the identity source. So if we go into management and we're going to say, you'll notice that the VCF automation isn't listed in here. Some of the components are. So we'll go into VCF automation and we'll say, hey, we want single sign-on to be part of, for anybody that wants to log on to VCFA or VCF automation, they want to use that single sign-on source. So we can say, yep, here's the identity broker here. We're going to say that we want to allow that to happen. And it's as simple as that. Now you can log into that appliance here, the VCF automation appliance, with your normal identity without having to go and create another identity for each different appliance. Right. So that's a quick overview of that one. Let's move on to certificate management. Everybody has to play with certificates as they're managing their infrastructure. It doesn't matter whether you're using just a web server that has a certificate, or whether you're using a whole data center or infrastructure. Certificates are part of operations life, and we've revamped everything in VCF 9, where you have this beautiful dashboard here that tells you what certificate is attached to which component within VCF, whether its expiry date is soon or not so soon, what type of certificate it is. And we can even go in and look at the individual hosts within the infrastructure, right? So now we're not just being able to replace and configure the certificates for the appliances, the management stack, but also the hosts themselves. So we can go in here and we can say, hey, let's configure a certificate authority. In this case, we're just going to add some details in here for an internal Microsoft cert authority. So we'll just add those details in there. We'll hit save. And now we've connected VCF to that, to that certificate authority. If you want to go in here, you can say, hey, here's an ESX server. Let's let's go in and first we need to generate a certificate signing request. So CSR, we can go in there and fill in all of the details that we need right here in the tool. You don't have to go out and do that anywhere else. It's right here in the UI. We'll generate the CSR. And now we'll just say, okay, now let's replace the certificate, which is already on here. It could be a self-signed certificate, or it could be one that you just want to replace. We'll configure it with the newly configured CA. We're going to replace the certificate, confirm, and as you can see, changes have come through. And now you can see instead of it being a VMware signed cert, it's now a Microsoft signed cert. It's as easy as that. It'll go in there and do that all for you. The other thing that we can do is you can, up here, there's a little checkbox flag that we can flick that says activate auto renewal. And that means that as certificates are reaching their expiry date, it'll actually go out and generate the CSR and apply a new certificate for you without you having to do anything. That makes it super duper easy to be able to manage your certificates. All right, that's a demo for certs. Let's move now into password management. Very similar to certificates. Managing passwords, especially in bigger environments, bigger fleets, can be a little time consuming. So we're again trying to provide that operational efficiencies that we can now that we've unified everything into this interface here, right? And we can go in here and we can start to see, well, which different VCF components have we got? How many different accounts have been created? You can see the details there. And we can go into one of these here and we can say, hey, we need to update that password. Let's say this admin password here has been locked out for some reason. We can just go in here and we can update it and we can change the password to whatever we want and it will update that for us. It will go in there and it will do that for us. So you see, we didn't have to log on to the VCF operations console. We didn't have to, reboot the VM into some shell to be able to get admin access, to be able to edit the password. You can do it right here from the VCF operations console itself in all of the fleet, which is fantastic. Makes things so much easier. All right, let's just break away from the demo here. And what I might do is I might just flick back over and we'll just talk about a couple of different features. And then I want to talk about patching, because patching is something that, again, is something that can consume a lot of time. And we've done a lot of improvements in VCF 9 to improve how much time you've done patching. All right, so one of the key features in VCF 9 is around the idea of doing mixed vendor clusters. So the way this works is within older versions of vSphere and VCF, you could only have a single image or a single way to be able to add different components when you're doing lifecycle management in a cluster. If you had a bunch of different hosts, then you'd need to create two clusters. And the way that cluster images works these days is we've made it, you can see here, we've got some components here and some components here. They're going to be different. That's why we've colored them differently, but they all go back to this base version. So you've got a base ESX version, there's no I anymore, the base ESX version with your additional components that sit on top of it, and then you can apply it to a host. And they can have different hardware support managers. You can have up to 4 different images per cluster, and that all gets rolled into a cluster image. So you could have, say, 5 Dell hosts, 5 HP hosts, and then they can all be sitting in the same cluster, even though they've got different firmware components and hardware support managers and all that kind of stuff. So includes VSAN, that kind of stuff. This is all part of the vSphere lifecycle management improvements. Okay, moving into another feature that you may have heard of this one before, because this one is was announced at VMware Explore last year, so August, September last year. We announced this as a preview where what you're able to do is you're able to utilize the PCIe NVMe devices within your hosts to be like a second layer or a second tier of memory. So you can increase the available memory available to the host, and you can therefore increase your VM consolidation ratio because you've got heaps, terabytes of extra memory within your hosts. Now, the memory for NVMe that is running in NVMe is not as fast as your core DDR memory. That's definitely not as fast, but NVMe storage is getting fast enough. And the way that this works is you'll get huge amounts of consolidation ratios, as I was saying, and the use cases for this are well, there are many. Personally, I love to have this in my lab at home so I can play around with things and not have to buy so much memory. NVMe is a lot cheaper. But if you think about environments like remote desktops and VDI and that kind of stuff, where you don't necessarily have hard-working server-based VMs. There's a lot of desktops on there, but they still need a lot of memory. Maybe not quite as critical to have the access speeds as what your servers would be, but your desktop certainly would be. So that's just one area that can be used. All right. Let's just flick back to, as I was discussing before, about lifecycle management. So just like the NVMe storage tier, this live patching feature was introduced in vSphere 8 Update 3, and it's something that is getting improved upon each release. So live patching is a way to be able to ensure that you can patch your ESX hosts without having to go through the time-consuming maintenance mode, reboot of the host, bring it back out, and then exit the maintenance mode, and then rebalance your cluster. Previously, we had certain components. Now NSX is also in there as well. So as I said, as we release new versions, there's more and more components that can be live patched. So what happens is actually, rather than just talk about the slide, let's go over and we'll do a demo. And I'll show you. It's easier to demonstrate. Let's do that. All right. So we'll go into lifecycle management, and we'll jump in here. And before we talk about the actual patching of the host, we'll just talk about the depot management a little bit. So in here, we can go into our instance here, which is called prod, and we can go into our depot settings, and you can see that there's an offline depot that's been configured, that's active, and that's just a way to be able to download the binaries without you having to go to support.broadcom.com and find the patch that you want. That's a thing of the past now. You just connect it in. You can see the different versions here, how big they are, whether they've been downloaded or not yet, how much space it's taking. We can go in here and look at patches. Oh, there's a patch available. Okay, so we could go in here and we could get that patch. Oh, this one's already downloaded. So now all we need to do is we were talking before about the multiple images and the image management with multi-vendor clusters. Here we can go in here and say, okay, well, we've got this image here that's for this ESXi version. Let's go and create a new one. Or import an existing one. And what we'll do is we'll log into vSphere itself. Notice how it says VCF single sign-on, because, hey, I don't need a new username and password because this is connected to my single sign-on. And I can just come across here. Excuse me. So once we're in here, we can go in. Just give me 2 seconds, sorry. And we can create a new image. And you'll see here that there is some live patches here. You can see the little icon there. Apologies. We can go in here and say, hey, we want this new version. We're going to select it. We're going to give it an image name, and we'll save this image. And once we've saved this image, we can flick back over to VCF operations, and we can just refresh that. And here's our new image. And we're saying, okay, well, here's the live patch that we want to apply. We can import that image and expand this out and look at this workload domain here. And this workload domain, we can go in here and we can say, okay, well, there's some available updates. Let's plan for this patch, right? We've got a current version here, ESX 9.0.0.0. We're going to change this to 9.0.0 patch 0100. Okay, so this is a new target build. We're not going to do NSX or vCenter in this time. We'll go over here. We'll validate the selection, make sure that that's compatible, and confirm that. Now, one of the great things about VCF 9 is as you're doing patch management and upgrades, you have this a wonderful interface to be able to plan it all out, to know exactly what's happening to which component before any of it's taken place. So it gives you a really good visual representation of what's going on here. So in this case, the sequence is pretty simple. We're going to update our host to this patch version. And we can go in here with this pre-checks and status updates and that kind of stuff. We're going to go and just configure it for now. There's a few checks and balances that get done, and we're just going to click through this pretty quickly for the sake of the demo. You can see that it's going to be assigned this new ESX version here, which is assigned an image, is assigned to that cluster. Now, this is the screen that I really want to call your attention to. You notice a few releases ago, we had an enhancement called Quick Boot, where instead of ESX, when you go to reboot the host, instead of it effectively powering off and powering back on, almost, where it resets to the BIOS, Quick Boot just unloads and reloads ESX. You don't have to go through that the BIOS initialization. And that's great. That saves you some time, especially on servers that have lengthy processes for their BIOS stuff, right? But this is the new section here. We want to say we're going to put live patching on here. So Quick Boot's disabled because these hosts are not going to be rebooted. We'll click next, and then we'll just run the pre-check. Okay, once that's been confirmed, we'll schedule the update and just simply go through this. We're going to do it straight away. And yes, we're just going to finish here. As you can see here, it's it's updating that cluster. So we'll go and view the status of it, and we can see it's going through here, setting the desired state and whatnot. Now, if we flick over to vCenter, you can see here what you normally see this partial maintenance mode here. What's happening is those VMs are being the host is reading an image and getting the new patch details and then reloading them again. It's not actually rebooting the host. The partial maintenance mode that you see there is very, very quick. And there you go. It's already done. It's a lot faster. We'll just flick back over to VCF operations here. The update didn't reboot hosts. The patch has been applied. And you can see that is certainly a lot easier and faster than having to go through extended maintenance of all your hosts. This is especially true for very large clusters where it takes a long time to roll through. If you've got 30 hosts or more, that can take a significant amount of time. And then, you just get some status at the end of it. And that's pretty much it for our live patching. It's going to save you guys a bunch of time. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you can do with all the time we've saved you. I'll hand it back over to Greg to start talking about some VSAN updates.
Live patching is awesome. I love it. Yeah, but no downtime is great. So with VSAN, as you guys probably know, VSAN ESA has been around for some time, since the start of version 8. But we've enhanced VSAN ESA enhanced storage architecture in VCF 9. with deduplication. And this is a global deduplication. It's slightly different to the deduplication we had in the original storage architecture. The original storage architecture, the deduplication was only for the single disk group. So anything in that disk group or any data in that disk group would be deduplicated. The problem with that was that obviously it's not a very big boundary for deduplication. So it doesn't find a lot of duplicate blocks. In the version 9, now we have this idea of doing a global deduplication. So that is deduplication right across every node in the cluster, the entire vSAN data store at a 4K granular level. So it's still very granular. So it has a huge amount of opportunity now to find more blocks that it can dedupe in that data store, which means you get better ratios for deduplication. When you add that to what you're already doing with vSAN ESA, it lowers the amount of storage significantly that you need. It's slightly different to original storage architecture dedupe in that was an inline process when we write the data. This is a post-process dedupe, so it doesn't have any performance degradation on any of the virtual machines. It runs in the background, and it only runs it with this adaptive throttling technique, which means if there's not much CPU available in the cluster at that particular time, we will throttle dedupe down, or even in some cases not run it. If there is huge amounts of CPU available to us, we might actually step up the dedupe as part of that as well. So there's this mechanism of which we can start to leverage. The great thing about this dedupe, though, is the way we've built it and the way we've done the technology stack for some of these storage services or data services in ESA is it works with compression, it works with snapshotting and cloning, it works with all the mirroring and erasure coding and even encryption. So the way in which we store the metadata and maps of where duplicate blocks are is really efficient, really smart. So you can turn all these features on all at once, and it says limited availability there. There's a form we just want you to fill out, really. It's just to make sure that you've got the right sort of ESA configuration with the right network and the right number of hosts, so that you're not turning it on for a 3-node cluster and expecting hundreds of percent or 100x dedupe sort of thing. So but it's very simple to do. We can help you with that. Our account teams or all the account teams have access to that. The next feature that we've added to vSAN ESA as well is where we've got this concept of a vSAN storage cluster, which you may have heard about. It used to be called vSAN Max. It's basically just a bunch of vSAN nodes that run ESXi and vSAN, but it runs no workloads. You've got a vSphere client cluster, so maybe 5 nodes, 12 nodes, whatever it might be, and they connect to the storage cluster through the use of a VM kernel interface. Now, the enhancement we've made in 9.0 is instead of having one single VM kernel interface which connects all of the I/O going from the virtual machines through to the storage in the other cluster, plus all of the synchronization of data and movement of data and everything like the back-end storage movement, we've actually separated those two networks out. So there's what we call a front-end network and a back-end network. And now the back-end network, which is a different VM kernel port, takes care of all the synchronization of data replication and metadata updates in the background, which has boosted the performance of vSAN storage clusters fairly significantly in version 9.0 as well. So all that storage traffic happens at the storage layer, all the front-end guest I/O talking to storage, writing data, all happens at the front-end network. So big change in that sense there as well. The third one is around some changes to stretch clustering. So now you can take a storage cluster and actually stretch it across two sites. So you could have some nodes in some site and some nodes in the other side as well. So you can sort of decouple that if you want. You can stretch the vSphere cluster, different levels of requirements for the vSphere cluster and the storage cluster. So some really good flexibility there as well. We also have a concept of putting an entire site into maintenance. So if you're running a stretch cluster and you used to have to patch or do some network changes or whatever it might be on one site, you used to have to roll through individually and do a whole bunch of configuration to take each of the nodes offline and do all that maintenance. We now have a UI essentially that allows you to put an entire site worth of vSAN nodes into maintenance and make sure that all the applications are available and will run on the other site and everything will still go ahead. Really, really easy to do. there's actually an extra feature we added to that, which is called the manual site takeover. So assume you're in that position where you've done a maintenance window, you've taken the site down, but then you have a witness failure and another site failure or a complete network outage or whatever it might be. You used to have to call our GSS team, and there's tools and things that they would have to run for you to basically get your VMs up and running again. Now you just come straight in here and do a manual takeover, and everything, it just breaks that stretch cluster apart completely, brings all your applications up running as they used to be and all that sort of stuff. And then we can rebuild the cluster at a later date. So something that's really, really super useful for customers that have really dodgy links that go down for periods of time, or just want to be able to recover from those sorts of scenarios. The last real major function or feature that we've added to this was enhancing the ESA snapshots. So for those of you who are aware, in VSAN 8, we launched with ESA a new snapshot mechanism, highly scalable, almost zero overhead to the snapshot mechanism, a storage level snapshot, and there's an automation framework around that called VSAN data protection, which you go and configure your VMs to be snapshotted on various time frames and how many snaps you want to store and all that sort of stuff as well. That's for a local site, so that's a local snapshot. What we now have the ability to do with the VMware Live Recovery capability is the ability to take snapshots and have those snapshots actually replicated as part of the protection policy. Local snapshots, also snapshots that are replicated to another vSAN cluster. And a sort of and the RPO there is down to as low as 1 minute. So you can do some really cool things with this. You can set up policies that do snapshots, maybe 100 snapshots locally and then 100 snapshots remotely. You can then, and one of the cool things we did was we took the vSAN snapshot appliance, the vSphere replication appliance, the SRM appliance, and built them all in as a single appliance called the VMware Live Recovery appliance. The cool thing about that is not only do you get this replicated snapshot functionality as well, but you also get the SRM piece with that. So now you have the ability, let's say you've lost an entire cluster and you have snapshots that are replicated to the other VCF environment or another site or whatever it might be. You actually now have SRM that you can start to go and press buttons and do the full reorchestration of bringing that cluster up. So if it's not just individual VM recovery because someone's deleted a VM or made a configuration change, but it's a complete site recovery or it's a cluster recovery or whatever it might be, this is another thing that you can do. If you add the vSAN storage clusters, if you add deduplication into these remote sites and things like that as well, then you start realizing how vSAN can be super useful for all that as well. So lots of good stuff coming or already there in vSAN and more to come as well. Nick, over to you.
All righty. Thank you, Greg. There's actually there's a bunch of questions. You guys have lots of questions. So Jatin has his work cut out for him at the moment. I'm just gonna pause on this slide just for a second, just before we get in there. There's one that I wanted to answer live, and then maybe we can ask a couple of others. Radhika said, could you please explain SDDC Manager versus VCF operations in VCF 9? Is VCF Ops a new component introduced in VCF 9? Okay, so if we go back to, I'm even going to skip to the beginning of this slide. All right, this kind of explains the hierarchical view where you can see VCF automation and VCF ops at the start here. Actually, there's even a better slide. There's this one where VCF ops and VCF automation, these components here are evolutions of ARIA operations and ARIA automation, but they've been reorientated to be at the top and in charge of an entire fleet. So what is a fleet? A fleet is one or more VCF instances. So you can see in here, here's a VCF instance in the left, and here's another one in the right. And SDDC Manager, just getting back to that question, is still deployed in each instance. Now, you don't need to log into here, just like you don't need to log into vCenter or NSX to do the majority of the tasks, because it's all driven out of the unified interface in here. Okay, so those components do still exist, but you using them will be reduced significantly. And then over time, more and more of the components, not the components, the functionality will be driven out of here. So there's a lot of things have been moved in here, not everything yet, but it will be more and more over time. But those appliances today still exist. Any other questions that we should answer live?
One of the questions I get, Nick, a bit is around the use of VSAN and NSX in VCF9.
Yep.
Is there any changes? Do we need to use both? Do we need to use any of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yep,
Actually, someone's just asked, mandatory sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of VSAN in prior versions of VCF, VSAN was mandatory in the management domain. Okay, and you could have any kind of storage, any kind of supported storage in workload domains, but you had to use VSAN in management. In VCF 9, that is no longer the case. You can use array-based storage for your management domain should you want to. Now, all those features and functionality that you were just talking about, Greg, they're not going to be available if you're using, some other vendor's storage array, but that is a compatible storage solution that you can use for it. In terms of NSX, NSX is going to be deployed for every domain, every workload domain, whether it's management or compute. Now, whether you choose to use that is completely up to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some new features that NSX has got around virtual private clouds in a moment, but we use it internally for our stuff. So when we deploy the other components, we use NSX internally for our stuff, so it's required for us. But if you just want to use VLAN-backed networks, that is completely fine. Go for it. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Alrighty, let's. How are we going for time? I think we're going to probably move through this stuff, and then maybe we'll do the.
We have 12 more minutes.
Yeah, we might. Let's talk about the networking pieces, and then we might push the automation demo to the next piece, since we're going to need that anyway. All right, so let's jump into virtual private clouds. So this is a feature that that has been, I guess, slowly developed over time. It's partially just an NSX piece, but in VCF 9, we get access to virtual private clouds throughout the entire platform. So let's try and just do a little bit of definitions here around the different personas here. So the enterprise admin, you would think about them as like the networking admin. They look after the top of rack switches, core network. They will go in and they will assign certain subnets and that kind of stuff, right? And within NSX, there's this term called a project, if any of you are familiar with that, and that defines kind of access into this environment. Now, that person does that, and then they assign a tenant to a project, and that will have an administrator, a project admin. They don't have access to that physical layer of the infrastructure, right? The project admin just thinks about what is inside my project. That is delegated to them by that top of tree enterprise admin. Okay. They are responsible for carving that project up into virtual private clouds, and then assigning blocks and as I said, quotas within there. And then within that, we have a virtual private cloud admin that is just basically they consume those networks, right? So that they can create networks from those pre-allocated IP blocks. They attach VMs to those particular subnets, but they can't do anything within the project, and they certainly can't do anything within the physical or north-south side of things. Now, in terms of consumption, this helps because it means that you can give people access to certain pieces of the puzzle depending on their expertise level. And it means that you can consume networking without having that really deep networking knowledge, but still get access to all the things that you need, especially when it comes time to building out an application that sits on multiple subnets but needs to be, physically and securely managed, well, the VCP admin can do that, but they don't have to know about all the things that sit higher in the tree than that. And then if we just dive into this a little bit more, we can say, okay, so if the VPC model has these 3 different roles and responsibilities, how do we connect each of those together? What's the connectivity, right? So the enterprise admin looks at VLANs or tier 0 routers within the NSX land, and then within each project is a transit gateway, right? So if you think about the T0 being that external connection, the T1 being that internal connection, and then each of those VPCs have a VPC gateway that talk to the transit gateway. And there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do in there, whether it's source and destination NAT, whether there's DHCP services, or whether you want to do load balancers. It's all available within the VPCs, and you can offer those services depending on what they need. That's one's for you, Greg.
Yeah. So look, just before we sort of, we have to take you back to, excuse me, sorry, with the slide we showed at the start, which sort of had the diagram with the purple and blue, the infrastructure layer, the automation layer, all that sort of stuff. And if we take a look at VCF automation, which is an amalgamation of ARIA automation and some other tools and things like that as well, into an interface to how you consume. There's 2 kind of users that build or leverage this platform. The first one is the provider administrator here. So this might be an enterprise administrator, an org admin, or something like that, where you have this infrastructure, you have this platform which they've provided you, which has got compute and storage and all these great things. But in order to be able to consume that, what you need is the ability to sort of say, all right, I have to come in and I have to configure my organizations and my tenants. So this, when you log into this, there's two different interfaces. You log in as a provider, and you log in and you specify the tenants, you create the tenants, you create catalogs or at least enable policies for them. You enable services, whether it's different types of services you want the folks to consume. So you do all this at an organization level, and essentially then once you've done that configuration, the consumers log into a slightly different, the same product, but a slightly different UI, a slightly different portal, which doesn't see all of the elements of configuration of the tenants necessarily, or configuration of all the policies and everything. Obviously, you don't want them to have that, but you just want someone to be able to have access to database as a service endpoints, or Kubernetes endpoints, or private AI infrastructure and tools that we've been able to enable for them, and have a various set of policies that are set up for them to leverage as they start deploying their applications. So they're the sort of 2 levels there. The consumer sort of can do this in a couple of different ways. Either they log in to the catalog if they want to, and they've got access to all the tools and things that they need that's been allowed to them to be able to leverage as part of that. And a lot of this tenancy model, I should say, comes from some of the work we've done with VMware Cloud Director for some time as well. And we've started to build that in so that now we've got the consumers who have their own view of the world, and they can tap into what they want to do and everything that's been provided by them by the provider at that sense. Now, whether they want to use CLI tools or other APIs or other automation frameworks and things like that, whether it's Terraform or other bits and pieces as well, all this is all supported as part of that as well. So we're giving flexibility to the teams on how they consume, but ultimately we do need a list of providers, or at least, a list of services and policies and everything that are set up straight away, or set up at the start effectively, or configured over time for them to be able to leverage, for the teams to be able to leverage based on however you want to carve it up. If you take a look at the supervisor services here on the right-hand side, this is one example. So supervisor services is a layer within vSphere and a layer within VCF that allows you to enable a Kubernetes environment with a bunch of core services that basically has a Kubernetes API over the top of it. So when your developers come in and say, look, we use the Kubernetes API for product development and application development and all that sort of stuff, we want to be able to leverage this. They want from us, they want not just a Kubernetes environment, but they want a whole bunch of different things, like the ability to create virtual machines with a Kubernetes API, like the ability to stitch in networking technology and storage technology, like we have with vSAN, like we have with NSX and Antria and all these sorts of things, a backup service with Valero. They want to be able to stitch these things together into the Kubernetes infrastructure and the applications they're actually building and pull from those core services. So we're shipping those core services out of the box with all of that, but we've also got a bunch of extensible services that we can now simply use. So things like Harbor, which is an image registry for all that sort of stuff. If you need a service mesh capability, secret store, external DNS and all these sorts of things are easily extensible services you can go and pull and integrate directly into the application architecture that you're building. So that's some cool stuff that we've been working on. And I said before, bringing Kubernetes as a first-class citizen into VMware Cloud Foundation, but not just Kubernetes, actually expanding the entire ecosystem around Kubernetes into Cloud Foundation so that customers who want to work in that model and leverage that model really have the best tools available for them to be able to do it. And, really easy for the rest of the teams to be able to make sure they've got the policies around them, make sure they've got the integration with the storage and the integration with the networks and the firewalls and everything that needs to go along with it. So it's a complete end-to-end view of being able to provide, that modern infrastructure stack as well. So I guess to bring that back together, this was the picture we showed at the start. So now hopefully you've got, and again, we can't go into so much detail. There's so much stuff to cover. There are other sessions, obviously, that will cover a little bit more detail on some of the things. I'd really encourage you to jump on and register for those and get involved. This was the first introduction. We introduced the concept of the different sort of folks that interact with the system with VMware Cloud Foundation 9. The parts of the elements of what happens in both sections here in the modern interface and the consumption part of VCF and then the administrative part of VCF. And then we're bringing our tooling and everything together as part of that. And in future, what you'll see in the next sessions around private AI and Kubernetes and all these sorts of things, how we layer on advanced services to make it truly simple, easy for you to add on all these additional services to the core parts of VCF 9 that we have. So that's where we've come from, and we've got all the way back to there now. So hopefully that's sort of tied some of those components together from the top to the bottom. And now you've got a bit of an appreciation of where the modern private cloud from VMware and Broadcom really sits and where we're happy to present VCF 9 to you. To close, there are a whole ton of resources here that you can go and do. It's very difficult, obviously, as I said, to cover everything here. The first thing I would say to you is our hands-on labs and blogs. If you want to get hands-on resources with all this, it's really fun to go and touch this with hands-on labs. There's a whole communities and FAQs and YouTube channels and everything. You can go and learn much more information. So if you want to, please do that. If you have feature requests that you're leveraging or want to leverage with this as well, there is a feature request portal that you can scan and go to and use that as you choose as well. We do have a short survey. We'd love to get some feedback, I guess, on which will help us for coming sessions and things like that as well. If you put the next slide up, Nick, there's a QR code. You can just quickly scan that QR code. We'd love to get some feedback. But we really appreciate everyone's time. It's been a huge turnout. That's the introduction for building a modern private cloud with VCF 9. Thanks everyone for your attendance.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Nick. And definitely thank you, Jatin, for handling the volley of questions. Please do take the survey. Your feedback is important, and we do expect to see you in the next session. I understand that there are a couple of open questions. Rest assured, our team will get in touch with you, attend the upcoming sessions to get them answered as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead.